Unique items in Path of Exile are a great way to start your build off, but generally speaking, rares are just better. Just like how my scriptwriter is better than me. Oh wait, I'm my own scriptwriter. This joke doesn't make sense anymore. This is especially true since influences and harvest were added to the game. Most of the time, uniques are just as powerful when you put them on in a tier 1 map as they are when you're still wearing them in a tier 16 map, whereas rares, and the enemies you're fighting, scale exponentially, at which point you can start to see the problem. On the other hand, you don't have to think much about uniques, because the stats are all the same, which is why they're called uniques, except when they're not, and except for the fact that that's the opposite of what the word unique means. So how can GGG make unique items more powerful? Is the solution simply remove harvest and influences? This would be a simple way to do it, and probably the most unpopular thing they've done since adding harvest to the game. There are currently a few ways to make your uniques better, such as corrupting it, or with the help of incursion, you can double that corruption. But that's still pretty niche. There aren't good corruptions for every slot, and there's a lot of items where the risk associated with a corruption doesn't really balance out with the reward you'll get out of it, so most people don't bother. And because one unique item is often just as good as another, why would you spend dozens of exalts to get a perfect double corrupted unique when you could spend a few chaos to get one that's 99% just as good? And this is where Scourge comes in, because you might want to Scourge that unique instead of a rare that you spent 15x making. And all of a sudden, the fact that the uniques are relatively cheap and relatively replaceable becomes a strength, which lets you fish for those modifiers that are incredibly powerful and may even be build defining. This video was brought to you in part due to the generous support of my YouTube channel members and patrons. More about how you can support at the end of the video, but if you want to help for free, you can do so by feeding the algorithm gods and leaving a like on the video, or turning on bell notifications so that you see whenever I upload. Scourge League is bringing what are functionally uber corruptions, and this is going to encourage players to risk destroying their high value items. If you have a lot of wealth to play with, a lot of crafting knowledge, or if you're an SSF, I'm sure you'll be tempted to Scourge absolutely everything you own. But for a lot of players, the idea of Scourging their rares might be a little bit intimidating, especially when each Scourge mod has a powerful upside and a powerful downside, and if you're playing something like, let's just say, a Fizz Trapper, getting deal no physical damage on that perfect pair of trap gloves you just made could be a little bit crippling. But on the other hand, I think we can all agree that a 1-2 Chaos unique is a risk that almost anyone's willing to take. After all, most people just vol the 1-2 C uniques that they actually pick up, and they only really pick up ones that have a useful corrupted implicit. But what if everything had a useful corrupted implicit? Because those corrupted implicits are Scourge mods. This helps to solve a long-time issue in Path of Exile, where, specifically in the softcore trade economy, items pile up. A relatively common unique, if it's in high demand, might be 30 or 40 C at league start. Then it'll fall to 10 to 20. Then it'll fall to 3 to 5. Then it'll fall to an alch, because not enough people are going to bother buying hundreds if not thousands of them to corrupt them, in the hopes of getting the good one, just to keep the economy going. Whereas with Scourge, you could very easily see clean versions of uniques that are uncorrupted, selling for a few dozen chaos, which adds a lot of value to the game. Again, at least when it comes to things that are in demand or in the meta. When it comes to proper motivation for corrupting or destroying items, Scourge modifiers are insanely powerful. There's some high roll options like putting Wicked Ward on a Shavs. Unlike previous methods of corruption, these seem far more broadly applicable. And also, very few items will completely brick. Yes, you will ruin your Starforge if it rolls deal no physical damage, since Starforge can only be used in a physical damage build anyway. When it comes to cheaper uniques, or uniques of a broader purpose, something like Obliteration, Hemophilia, Rhyme Gaze, Crown of the Inward Eye, Belt of a Deceiver, Dream Fragment, Sappho's Frame, or Hrim Sorrow, maybe even the new improved 3-step Assault, if you brick them, you're only out a bit of time and a couple chaos, and a mod that might not be great could end up being useful. After all, deal no cold damage on a Rhyme Gaze is pretty bad, but if all you're doing is using the helmet for cheap conk effect, and you have some other powerful effect, like let's just say a massive boost to ES on the item, it could be worth using regardless. This means there's a very low barrier of entry to Scourging your items, especially cheap uniques, but the payout could be incredibly high. And there's enough variability that even if it isn't good for you, you'll probably be able to sell it to someone else. Or if you're an SSF, maybe you'll reroll to something that's a little bit more interesting as a result of a truly unique item you just scourged. This also has implications for the way people build characters in Path of Exile. It means you'll be more likely to use uniques, and the unique that you put on in a tier 1 map will get stronger by the time you're in a tier 16. After all, there's a significant difference in the power level of a Chavrones and a Chavrones with Wicked Ward on it. So these perfect scourged items, while rarer, are much more powerful, and give people a way to progress their endgame without having to interact with all the rest of a crafting system in PoE. This could be problematic if it's taken too far, if uniques become too good, and we start wearing pure orange builds, but so long as there's still a reason to use influence mods, and as long as Harvest is still in the game, I don't see this happening anytime soon. But it'll definitely lower the bar to entry for some builds, which have previously struggled because the uniques fell off, and while it felt really good in white maps, in reds it began to be a bit of a struggle. All of this fits very well with the theme of this league, which is raising the floor. And while in a lot of cases raising the floor has buffed the best items that can exist in the game, I can't stress how much easier it's going to be to get items that are slightly better than the baseline, and how incredibly difficult it's going to be to get a perfect Scourged unique. You might buy Shavs for 40 or 50 chaos. It's affordable, and expensive enough to not be taken lightly. In the past, you could double corrupt it, and if you hit +2/+2 gems, you might be able to sell it for a mirror. But what if you wanted a +2/+2 gem Shavs with Wicked Ward on it? Well, that might sell for 20 mirrors. But it also might take hundreds of Shavs. So, outside of weird people and standard collectors, it's not really going to have a practical impact on your day-to-day. But all those failed Shavs that didn't get Wicked Ward, well, they might be cheap and more easily affordable for the average player. So what this means is, if you're looking to interact with a Scourge mechanic as much as possible and make some amazing perfect god tier items that could never exist before for yourself, you can do that. If you're looking to wear some uniques and get a solid baseline of power, but want a way to scale that into endgame maps, you can do that. If you're looking for a way to have steady profit as part of your mapping, you could do that. Pick up some cheap uniques, scourge them up to tier 3. There's enough variance that you'll high roll occasionally, and you should be able to sell for enough of a profit that you'll gear your character out before you know it. This also means that cheap uniques will go up slightly in value. Something that was 1 alch or 1 chaos before might be 2 or 3c. It's not enough to completely cripple you, and it's not enough to help an efficient player, but if you're an incredibly inefficient player, and you picked up those 1 alch uniques, now you have more money to invest into other aspects of your build. And again, I do want to stress, there is going to be exponential power creep as a result of this. But I don't think it's going to be as problematic as we've seen in the past, because there's also exponential content to absorb that. Wave 30 Simulacrum isn't going to be a joke. Blight Ravaged maps aren't going to be a joke. Flawless Breachstones aren't going to be a joke. And the new Domain of Timeless Conflict looks like the bar to entry is a headhunter. So my hope is that Scourge League will make all of Path of Exile more approachable. It'll allow uniques to function as a baseline, and it'll also allow them to function as a kingpin, holding your build together as you scale around it with rares. If you're struggling with the transition between yellow and red maps, this should help. And this synergizes incredibly well with the defensive buffs we're seeing going to 3.16. But what do you think? Are you excited to scourge a bunch of things, or were you concerned that it would be too expensive? And has this video changed your perspective? If so, what item do you think is going to be the best thing to scourge early in 3.16? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and again, a special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members. If you want to support me, you can do so by clicking the links down in the description below, or on screen right now. You can also support by making purchases through my Nexus page. Or if you just want to chill and hang out, be sure to join the Discord. Again, links for everything are down in the description below. Thank you, and have a great day.